I wanted a person who would stand side by side with me. I mean, remember, we're coming out of COVID. The world's crazy. I just wanted someone who was going to be a fighter, who was going to stand there with me, next to me, embrace my kids, love them. And then, we'll figure out life together. And that's what literally I prayed for.
Have you ever wondered if it's possible to find love and happiness again after experiencing immense pain and loss?
Today we sit down with Dawne and Larry, a couple who found each other in their 40s after going through their own personal tragedies.
They are the founders of Grit2Grace, helping organizations create more compassionate and empathetic work environments.
They share their incredible journey of healing, love, and starting a business together.
You'll learn how they met and blended their families. Stay to the end to discover how you too can find joy, purpose, and love on the other side of pain. Welcome to Rewrite Your Story, the podcast where change begins with you.
We're your hosts, Stephen and Sharlene.
As professional coaches and mentors trained in various modalities, we have helped hundreds of people
Bridge the gap between the person they are
and the person they want to be.
We bring you conversations with real people who have overcome real setbacks.
You will walk away with practical steps to find more clarity, alignment, and success in any area you want to improve.
So join us and discover how you have the power to overcome, to change, and to rewrite your story.
So pick up the pen. Your new chapter starts now.
So Larry and Dawne, you've got quite a unique story, and we're focusing on dating later in life. So tell us, what was the catalyst that made you start looking for a partner or dating later in life?
You want to go first?
Okay, so I guess I'll have to go back to a little bit of my story, right? The history. So I don't know that anybody looks to date later in life. I think circumstances happen to you during the course of your life. In my particular case, my wife passed away back in 2011. And, it took a period of time, obviously, to work through that and to grieve. But, one of the things I always knew was that I loved being married. Like, I loved being in a relationship and a loving relationship and so forth. And I really wanted that again in my life. So, I got to a point where I started to, okay, I'm going to have to try this dating thing. And, I tried. When you're in your 40s at that point, and I'm in my 50s, but when you're in your 40s, what do you do, right? So I started those online dating sites and stuff like that. And, went on some dates here and there. So that was kind of the catalyst to what got me to actually later in life to go back and try the dating scene.
And tell her, so you have to add to this the part where you were like, how you create the profile for the dating. Larry was like, do I say that I have 8 children? Do I not say that I have 8 children?
Yeah.
Will it scare them away? What do I do?
So that was always, so then you get to the dating site. It's like, well, how do I describe my situation? So I do have 8 kids, right? And, it'd be like father of 8 seeking, and it'd be like, they would head for the hills. So I was like, I can't do that. And it'd be like nice guy seeking. But then that always led to the first conversation and that really awkward pause with, well, so how many kids do you have? So I have 8. And then there would be that awkward silence. I'm like, well, that's not really a fair way to do it. So I had to kind of settle on somewhere in between. To let them know I was a dad, but maybe not quite 8. So, yeah.
Just up front.
Yeah, exactly.
My situation is a little different. I was married 18 years, have 2 beautiful daughters from that marriage. I was raised by a mother who didn't want me and was very abusive. So I experienced abuse in my whole childhood and really knew nothing else. So that equaled love to me. So I had to leave home at 16 and a half years old just to escape that and raised myself. So I became a young mom. I did always want to be a mom. Got married, but that marriage ended. And then I ended up dating somebody who was even more toxic and abusive, which again, I wasn't aware of this. I just thought it was love. But once I got out of that, I stayed single for 5.5 years. And I think maybe went on 5 dates in that 5.5 years, because I was really not wanting to date ever again. But having said that, I always believed in love. So it was kind of a conflict. I am a romantic, but I had a problem trusting after my whole life basically being a lie and full of abuse. And with all the work that I had done on myself, now I had a strong foundation for who I am. And I was never going to let anyone hurt me again. But you really can't go through life having that wall up. So I opened my heart, and I kind of always joked and said, my person is going to show up like a Hallmark movie. I don't know if you have those in Australia, but, very romantic. And Larry did not show up like that. But we were introduced by a mutual friend. And that was nice because I never wanted to do those dating sites. And I always wanted to meet someone organically. So that's exactly how it happened. And she did tell me he had 8 children right from the start before I even spoke to Larry. So luckily I love children and I wasn't scared. So
that's really beautiful.
Just going back to Larry and the 8 children, you mentioned that your wife had passed away, and obviously that we can go later on into how that affected you and the children. But what was their response when you said, I'm wanting to date again?
So they were all different ages. So my youngest son was 2 months old after my wife passed away, right? Or
Wow.
2 months old when she passed away. So I had anywhere from 2 months old to 15. So it took a few years before I started to, think about dating. And I would say the first few times I didn't even say anything, right? Because I wasn't even sure what this was all about and how I was going to accept it or like it and so forth. But, eventually I just was upfront with them, and I kind of I explained it to you guys, right? Like I had a great relationship. I really loved being married and in love. And I just said to them, like, look, at some point your dad is going to date again and hopefully fall in love and hopefully get married. And, you guys will have a wonderful, wonderful female role model in your life because, that's the type of person I'm going to marry. So I just tried to kind of paint it to them as it was going to be additive for our family and, not make it threatening to them and so forth. And again, imagine it's a span of, 15 years, right? Age difference. So they took it different ways, but the older ones were always very supportive. They're like, Dad, listen, we want you to be happy. We want you to go date and fall in love again, get married again. So they were always supportive. And, the younger ones, it would be more conversation just to make sure they kind of understood what was going on. And, it didn't mean that their mother, I wouldn't have still a place in my heart for their mom because I always would. Mm-hmm. But I just knew, right, the power of love and the power of your heart and so forth, that there was room to do both. And, I just had to kind of help them feel comfortable with that. So,
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah.
Reassuring them that, hey, Mum's still alive in my heart.
Yeah.
Right.
But there's also space for someone else. I think that's really
such a gracious way of handling that.
That's beautiful. Larry, obviously, like having a 2-month when your wife passes away and having 8 children, that must have been a big shock, or I'm not sure of the circumstances, or a big change in your world. And definitely for someone else that's looking to date later in life and has been a widow or a widower. How did you navigate those 15 years to come to the point where, because both of you have very different backgrounds and each one would have quite like some trauma attached to it, So I like to look at both perspectives, because both the journey would have been different in rewriting your story, but also looking to the point of how then did you rewrite it as a dating couple? So Larry, if we can go to you first.
I would say, so the journey from, when she passed away, her name was Chris, when Chris passed away to that point was, it was a long journey, right? And it was complicated, right? In the first few years, like we were, just trying to get our feet back on the ground, stay balanced, find our footing. And I always like to say that we survived, one day, 1 hour, sometimes 1 minute at a time, because that's all we could look ahead. We had a tremendous support system between our family, our friends, the community, the parish, the schools, the church and so forth. And they helped sustain us through those early times and got us back on our feet. And, then you live your new normal and you figure it out. But the challenge for me is, as time went on, I jumped back into my career I was with GE at the time, and I was an executive and for the first few years, I was able to handle that. And then I kind of got back into traveling a lot. And there was a lot of pressure and stress. And ultimately, it led to a crash. And this was about 6 years later. And, it led me through a process to heal. And so during those, I took 4 months off. I was actually going to take, 3 or 4 months leave of absence. Went through a process to heal. I grieved for really the first time. I think I resolved some things in my life from my early childhood that I never had, kind of faced into everything. And on the other side of that process, right, we talk about kind of transforming your pain into your purpose. On the other side of that, I found just joy. Like I found my purpose in life. And I made the decision at that point that I wasn't going to go back to work. I was actually going to stay home and raise my kids. And so that's what I did. And I showed up on our first date healed, right? And Dawne will talk about her side of that process too. But if I hadn't showed up healed or had not gone through that process, I don't know that it would have came about the same way. I don't know that we would have connected or fell in love the same way, because I still would have been working through things, still trying to resolve things in my life. And so I think really the answer to the long-winded answer to the widower out there who's thinking about this is, you really have to heal. Like you can't avoid it. You really have to go through the pain to get to the other side. But what's on the other side really is joy. And then life opens back up to you, and relationships and connection and love and all that is possible once again.
I think that's really insightful, because you do see a lot of people, and I'm just looking at an outside of what I've observed. Some people go from relationship to relationship, repeating the same cycles. And, I think, Larry, when you're saying I had dated before, but I hadn't crashed, and then you crashed and then started dating again, but you dated healed. I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you believe that it wouldn't be fair to the other person that you were dating had you not healed completely and gone into a fully committed relationship at that time?
Yeah, I think so, because I know from my perspective, if your heart is not resolved, if there's still a lot of pain, if there's still a lot of grief, and I think grief can be lifelong. Right? It doesn't mean that you're completely healed and you're never going to be triggered again, or you're never going to have those moments of sadness and so forth, because they're going to happen throughout life, right? But if I had not kind of healed my heart to the point where I could take that place in my heart that was, reserved for Chris and kind of keep it tucked away. But then the rest of my heart open up, to Dawne, and, and again, allow myself to not only love her, but then to be loved back by her. Right. I think then we would not have been able to connect in the way we did. And I think it would have been, maybe me struggling with things in my head, trying to reconcile stuff, and her trying to figure out, well, what's he thinking about and all that. But I feel like when I met her, like I said, I like to say two hearts of joy met that night. Right. And, we're able to connect and just start the relationship.
Yeah. And I would add in too, that was actually one of my top concerns, knowing that his wife was this amazing woman, wasn't like a divorce. It wasn't a horrible situation such as mine. There was no animosity. Like, I was walking into an angel's footsteps. And the pressure that I felt before I even got in, like, I didn't know that it was going to turn into a relationship. But right away, because we were introduced by a mutual friend who knew his wife, I was like, well, okay, like, is there a pressure? Like, I'm not her. So do I have to be like her? Do I have to do everything? And I remember in the beginning, there were some things that my girlfriend had told me, like, well, she does this and she did that and she did this. And I was like, okay, but that's not me. So immediately I was like on guard, like, I can't be her. And then I thought, no, why am I doing this? I am just going to show up as me. I know who I am. But my concern was, is he healed? Is he ready to love again? Because I don't know if I ever would have been, right? You go through that pain. Again, it wasn't a bad relationship. It was of love. So I'm like, I don't even know if I could have done that. But then having said all of that, if I wasn't healed, which I went through my own journey of healing, I wouldn't have trusted his words, and I wouldn't have been able to believe what he said or how he acted around me, because I would have had the voices in my head that were programmed from my previous relationships of, you know, you're not good enough, you're not the one, you're, you know, all these narratives playing in my head, which then would have not allowed me to actually be in a real trusting relationship. So I had to be healed too. And like he said, you know, we came together to that date as two whole people that healed and did tremendous work through tremendous trauma and had to regain who we were individually and then allow ourselves to love again. I never thought that I would, but I did believe that if I did, it was going to be heaven sent and that the person was going to show up from God. It wasn't going to be me hunting for him. So,
well, I like to say too, we progressed 10 dates on our first date. We literally did. You want to talk about our first date?
Yeah.
So we spent a little bit of time on the week leading up to the date on the phone after we got introduced. And then we had our first date. It was lunch in a little restaurant in the town near us. And, you know, I get there, I'm like nervous like a little kid. She shows up and like my eyes are like, wow, you know, like immediately. And she had actually the same reaction.
Yeah.
And we spent a couple hours just over lunch talking, very casual, very open, very comfortable. And so then we decided to go around the corner and just get dessert and coffee and stuff and just continue the discussion. And we probably sat there for another 3 hours, but the conversation shifted into our journeys, right? Our journeys to overcome and to the trauma that we went through and the healing process that we went through. And what we found pretty remarkably is that the process we went through to heal was very, very similar, very similar. And how faith played a big role in both of our journeys to get there. And I remember leaving that night. It's now nighttime, right? I think I showed up at the restaurant at 11:30 in the morning and now it's nighttime when I leave, and just on a way different plane. It wasn't so much, are we going to go out again? It's like, wow, what is this relationship could have evolved to? There's so much possibility here because we connected on so many levels, and we've just found that, you know, not only with the circumstances and what we came through, but our missions in life aligned so much. And that would come into play a year and a half later, but the foundation was literally set on the first date.
And I would say at this age, so dating in your 40s, 50s, or second marriage or whatever, or not marriage, but relationship after marriage, you know, when like the 5 dates that I said I went on in the 5 years, I knew in 5 minutes that it was a no. And I was done with the date in 5 minutes. But I knew intuitively with Larry, when I walked in, as he said, there was this moment. And I remember saying, I swear to God on this, I heard the words, this is your person that you've been waiting for. And I'm like, oh my God. So then, like, I had not dated really, like meaningful date. I didn't even know if I'd remember how to kiss. Like, that's how foreign it felt for me. And then I was like nervous. And then when I'm nervous, I can't eat. And then he wants to go get ice cream on top of lunch. And I'm like, I'm going to throw up. So there's a lot of nerves that go into that kind of dating, you know, when you're in your middle ages and, you know, it's different.
Yeah. And it's so refreshing to hear that you covering that, like those nerves and, you know, not ignoring that fact that, you know, there's always going to be those initial nerves, and especially all like the lead up to it. And even though it's like that voice that you heard and you're following your intuition, there's still going to be those nerves, isn't there? Like, you know, you're like something completely foreign to you. And what I'd like to know,
I'll say the one thing, like, I don't know, as a woman, and maybe I'm old fashioned, but the men here, so they think if you go out on a first date that they can just immediately give you a kiss. Again, maybe I'm old fashioned, but you know, they go from lunch to a kiss to more, you know, sometimes taking you home or whatever. And I had this conviction that I was not going to kiss anyone on my first date. Like, I don't even know this person. So I needed to be okay with it. I needed to give permission to that person, right? And I was never going to be taken advantage of again. You know, that was kind of my head. And so I was like praying at the end of this date, like, please don't try to kiss me. Please don't try, because that would just ruin the whole date. And he did not, which was great. And then the second date, he knew just like I wasn't ready. And so again, maybe it's me, but I knew after that that I needed to give her permission. I'm like, okay. So then I literally told him in so many words, like, the next time I see you, give me a goodbye or hello kiss or whatever. But yeah, like it was so nice because I felt respected and that it was built on, he knew what I came through because we had shared with each other. And he said something, he said to me, I want to restore your faith in humanity. So when he wanted to kiss me and he, I guess, instinctually knew that I didn't want to back, that's what he said. And so that to me was the ultimate respect and level of kindness. So.
Yeah. And it's so important, isn't it? Like, I'm so happy for you guys.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I was going to say, I will add between the second day and the third day, which is, I gave her a kiss on the third day, I got COVID. So we were shut down for 10, 12 days. And so, but what it did was every night we got on FaceTime, right, with our phones and talked for hours, like hours. And so we bonded so much over this 10 days of COVID that by the time I met her or saw her again for our third date, I felt like I'd known her for years, right? Because we had covered everything on those conversations and opened up and, you know, about our kids and our lives and all that. And so there was such a comfort level there that, you know, you think COVID's such a negative thing, but it turned out to actually be a blessing. And it established our communication.
I was going to say, communication is
we
key.
communicate all the time, whether it's text or phone call or video. We don't live far apart, but, you know, because of our lifestyles and even though we work together, we see each other more now. We still don't see each other as often we would like. So it's text at night before we go to bed or in the morning we wake up or video calls. So, but it did establish our communication very early.
Yeah. And we have the same love language. So I'm sure you guys are aware of that with the work that you do. But, you know, that helps to establish what is that person's love language. And I'd say it's both the same for us, you know, touch, feel, communication, you know, just being together. It's not the frivolous, you know, gifts and stuff like that. So that helped.
Yeah, absolutely. Dawne, you're alluding earlier to your process of healing before meeting Larry. Can you tell us a little bit about what started you on that journey? What got you just starting that healing?
Yeah, for sure. So as I mentioned, you know, I had basically lived a life of abuse, starting with my parents, and then it continued into my relationships throughout my younger years, adulthood. And when I hit bottom, crashed and hit bottom with that, at the age of 46, I went to therapy and said to my therapist, clearly I'm the problem because I was the common denominator in those relationships. And those people all told me I was the problem. So again, this is all abuse. You know, I didn't know any better. But so my therapist obviously said, you know, after hearing my story, she said, no, honey, you're the victim. And then she's the one who explained that I didn't know any better. I thought it was love. That's actually going to be the title of my book. I thought it was love. But you gravitate towards familiar and comfortable. And so that's what I did. I would then, you know, be attracted to men that were very similar to my parents. So when I crashed, I then threw myself into therapy. Therapy got me to a certain point, but then I felt like I was stuck and I wasn't advancing. I was just showing up, crying, telling a story, and that was it. So then I found life coaching, which was wonderful because then you're advancing, you're setting small, achievable goals, you're building and reframing and recreating. And I fell in love with that. And then my faith is huge because at one point it wasn't. And then I went back to church, and that pastor there was the one who was extremely a big part of my healing and keeping me grounded in my faith, despite the challenge and the pain. And then I started to write a book and became a life coach to help others. And that was in 2016. And that whole thing was that was very cathartic for me to be able to write and then to speak and help young women. I would every once in a while go speak at this local domestic shelter, and it helped me heal, but it also helped others. So that was really my process. And I worked out. Like, that was my vice. I loved the gym. I did some crazy Spartan race and I did other things that I had no business doing, but that was how I released, what was inside. So
It sounds like a very holistic approach where it was mind, body, and spirit. And that's so important when it comes to healing, that we're looking at all aspects of our human life. A few things that I want to touch upon. I can't remember which one of you said it. You said 2 hearts of joy met that night. Dwayne said that. Larry said that.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about that, Larry, because that's a really poetic, 2 hearts of joy met that life. Speak into what you mean by that.
So it just to me represents the fact that we had both, as we've just talked about, both gone through a healing process. And, when I was going through the healing process, I actually became very fixated on the term joy. And I'm writing a book as well, and I'm playing with the cover, and my title, I believe, is going to be In Search of Joy, right? And because that was, as I was going through it, I just want, it's in the Bible, it talks about joy, and joy to me is more of a presence. It's not an emotion. It's not fleeting. It's not the highs of happiness and the lows of sadness. It's sustainable. It's within your body, it's within your, to me anyway, my faith, it's the Holy Spirit inside of me, right? It brings me joy. And I just wanted to get to that point because life had been so hard and so challenging. And when I crashed, like I said, I took a leave of absence. I was a wreck physically, emotionally, mentally at that point, and I needed to heal. And through that healing process, I needed to grieve and I needed to resolve some things. But when I got to the other side, there was joy. And I was able to then sit down and write my mission statement of the rest of my life, reprioritize what was going to be most important. There was 5 elements to it, one of which was I wanted to fall in love again. I really wanted to be married again. And so I had hit a point of joy. And Dawne, when I met her and her story, and it's just something you feel from the other person, right? You can't fake joy. And so when we sat down that day across from each other and had that conversation and opened up, you just know innately, right, that you're on that level with the person. And she's not making up what she's talking about. She's not making up her feelings, and neither am I. And so I just felt like we both came to that luncheon that day ready to form up. If God willing, we were the right person for each other, and we believe we are, and he put us together, that to me it was 2 hearts of joy coming together that day that met and were ready to explode again, because for years they hadn't, and it was that's the description.
Awesome.
yeah.
Awesome. And Dawne, you mentioned that you knew it was a real trusting relationship. Yeah. How did you know that? Because you hadn't experienced that before.
That's a good question and a good point, and something I touch on. I never knew what love was. I never knew it. The only love I knew that was real and trusting was mine with my children with me. And I have a lot of great friends, and I have a lot of great male friends. So when I went into therapy and started my journey of healing, I remember saying to my therapist, I'll never trust a man again, ever. Because I was hurt in the hands of a few. And although, my mother was the worst of it, so I really should have been saying, I'll never trust a woman again. But she said to me, I don't believe it's the man that you won't trust. I believe it's that you don't trust yourself and your judgment and your choices. And that really, that broke me in a good way. That brought me to tears, because she was right. Here I am navigating my life thinking I've made all great choices, and it felt like I made all wrong choices. So I really had to learn how to love myself, trust myself, and all of those, I speak about it all the time, the instinct that we humans feel, whether it's in our lungs, our chest, our stomach, our body, everywhere. It happens. It's real. And we need to listen to it. And I felt those instinctual knowings of danger, fear, bad, get out, run, all those things. But I tucked my feelings away and I made excuses for them. And I thought that they were butterflies in my stomach because I loved the person so much. And that was just the programming that I was given, that what I'm thinking and feeling isn't real. It's the opposite. So I had to undo a lot. And I then had to love myself. And then once I loved myself, I knew the love that I would accept and how it would feel, because I knew what I gave out, excuse me. But I also knew that I would instinctually know by trusting myself that when I met the right person, I would feel it and I would hear it. And it's exactly what happened when I walked in that restaurant. I swear on the Bible, when I heard this is your person that you've been waiting for, and I then was like, oh my God, like I wanted to run. I did. I didn't know how to handle that because now I'm going to enter for the first time, a loving, real relationship. And I don't know what to do with it other than just be me. So, and then in my head, I'm like, well, is me good enough? Is that enough, to show up as just me? So really, it was like dating for the first time for me in a real relationship.
And I appreciate that. That could have been pretty scary for you, which is why you would run away. And the fact that you're stuck with it, which is absolutely beautiful too.
Okay, let's move forward. You've done the dating. You've said, okay, this is it. We're meant for each other. You're two people in your 40s. Your habits are already established. Your little idiosyncrasies. I've seen a lot of older couples come together and they're like, I love him, but that just irritates me and I don't get it. And so how did you navigate? Like, Larry, you would have had some family traditions that Dawne's like, what is that? How did you go through that later in life, coming together?
So there are lots of traditions, and I love the children and Larry, and I love that they have traditions, and I want to celebrate them. But there are some that I'm just never going to do or never like. And we got to learn how to come to the middle with that. And that's okay. Those are things that will work out. It's not a big deal. But the one story that we have that I think you were laughing at is, I would say it's more who he is or was. When I met him, he was used to running a ship, right? You've got 8 children and it's like, we all wake up, he's got 5 boys and 3 girls, but the 3 girls were pretty much raised as boys. There's no glam. There's no time to be a girl. You're just getting up, throwing a ponytail in your hair, you're brushing your teeth, and you're going out the door. So 5 minutes to get ready. So we went away on a basketball tournament weekend, and we were newly dating. I mean, how many months? So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll go to a basketball tournament. Well, my kids never play basketball, so I don't really know what I'm getting into. All I know is it's like a dark, cold, dreary arena that you're sitting in all day instead of like being outside or whatever. But anyway, I'm going. So we go and we get there and, we wake up in the morning and Larry wakes me up and he's like, okay, you got to wake up. You've got 5 minutes. We have to be downstairs for breakfast. And I'm like, what? Who does that? Like, who wakes somebody up and says, you've got 5 minutes? So then, okay, fine. I literally throw my hair in the sun. Well, his daughter was with us and she rolls right out of bed. She's used to it, throws her hair out, brushes her teeth. She's ready. Me, I'm like struggling. I've got all these parents that I'm going to be meeting, and I'm trying to look human, not like I just rolled out of bed. And so we get downstairs and I learned that we're like an hour early for breakfast. And then we're like an hour early for the event even. So I'm like, where are all the other moms? Like, why am I down here alone? And he's like, oh, they'll be down or whatever. So then we go to the event, the tournament, and we're an hour early. So Larry needs to just get seats. But you know what? There's nobody there. So there are plenty of seats. Like there is no need to be there an hour early. So I'm like so annoyed at this point because I am not an early person. I am always late. So that's bad on my part, but I'm definitely never an hour early. And so we get to the arena. I look like shit. No one else is there. And we're sitting there and I'm like, what the heck? So then the moms start piling in and coming in and his one friend, the wife comes over and sits with us. And luckily I had met her before and she's in full glam, hair's done, makeup, looks amazing. And she's there like 10 minutes early, which is normal. And, I'm like, why does she get glam time? And I'm like rushed out of bed. So needless to say, when we got home, on the ride home, it was chipper, I should say. Yeah. I mean, we kept a smile on our face and I was just so annoyed. I didn't know how to handle it. It's newly dating. His daughter's in the back seat. I'm not about to say anything out loud, but when we got home, she went inside and I said to Larry, I said, you know what? I am not your ninth duckling. I am not the ninth child that's going to be literally ripped out of bed and expected to throw a ponytail in my hair, brush my teeth, and then go and be like this, you know, we're running a ship. Like, I'm not doing this ever again. So I was laying down the law at that point. So that's like a thing that was a big deal in the beginning for me. And he was used to running a ship, and I don't operate that way.
Yeah.
I'm 10 years removed from my kids needing me that way. Like, they're older. My kids are 30 and 28 now, so they're independent. And so for me to now go back like to 10 years of this chaos, and then now you're waking me up crazy time, and then you expect, it was just like, I'm not doing this.
So I did learn from that. Like, okay, like, and you know, it's been a struggle because, I mean, I had this, we met in 2021, right? So 10 years, right, passed. And, you know, you, to her point, I ran a tight ship. I had to, like, I had no bandwidth. I had to, like, make decisions. I had to go do this. And it was just the way we operated. But so I had to take a step back and like, okay, like, this is different. Like, this is a relationship. She's going to be equal in this relationship. So I have to respect, you know, learn about her and what's important to her. Just the same, she had to learn about what was important to me and, you know, have the respect for what I valued and so forth. And so it's a trial and error. It was definitely a funny, you know, I still own a shirt that says I am not the ninth duckling with 9 ducklings on it. But we learned, I mean, through that and a lot of things like that.
Like, I'm a woman and I wear hair and makeup and get dressed up. I'm not a boy. I don't get up and go. And that is a real thing. And I wasn't going to be made fun of for that or made to feel that this was a problem, because if that was the case, then that was going to be a problem, because I'm not changing who I am to fit into his mold or anyone else's. I will 100% understand where he comes from, but he needs to understand who I am as a woman, not just somebody that's going to throw in and, you know, run.
Well, she has since taken my daughters and introduced them into the world of glam. And so they love it. And, you know, they were learning that on their own as well, but she has definitely accelerated it. And
now they're getting their nails done, their hair done.
And that's so good. You know, when you were saying that story, I just kept on having flashbacks of the movie with Drew Barrymore and Blended, you know, when she was like with the daughter and the,
Blended.
yeah. So,
yeah.
well, how did you blend 2 lots of children? Like, how did that all navigate, you know, and what is and feel free to not answer this question if it's too personal, but what is the hierarchy when it comes to the relationship and the children? Because, you know, I've seen a lot of couples that have come together later in life and there is not the respect for the other partner's children, and they're your children. How did you navigate all of that?
Yeah, I love children, number one, and immediate empathy for these children. I'm going to get upset. Yeah, my heart bled for them. It really did. And as somebody who didn't have a good mother, my number one thing in life was to be a mother. And while I'll never be their mother, I will try to be their biggest fan and supporter and female model and just love them. And so I tried to get to know them individually the best I could. You know, each one of them has a different language for me. We talk about different things. And so with each one of them, I have a special bond, I'd say. And then the girls, obviously, they are with me more. It's not that I love them more, but one of his oldest sons, you know, I got him a job and we worked together for a short period of time. And I just fell in love with him more and more every single day. And I'm so proud of him. I have a different love for each one of them. So.
Yeah, I remember when we first started dating, she would ask all kinds of questions about him. Like, it was almost like she was keeping notes, you know. It was just part of our FaceTimes during our COVID hiatus. But yeah, she just took a real deep interest in them. And you know, she's an empath, she's a life coach, she has a great relationship with her daughters. So I knew, I mean, one of the things that was important to me was that she was a mom and understood children and had those bonds and so forth from, had met them or had an understanding of that. So because I felt like for my children, that was going to be important again for them to be able to have that kind of relationship or whatever. So she just had a keen interest in them. She took notes, like I said. She asked me lots of questions about them, and to her point, she has built individual relationships with them, and it was beautiful to see. And it's honestly what I had prayed for, right? I had said I want somebody in my life who's going to stand, and this is kind of back to your question, Stephen, like hierarchy. There isn't really a hierarchy. Like I wanted an equal. I wanted a person who would stand side by side with me. I mean, remember, we're coming out of COVID. The world's crazy. I'm trying to make sense of this while still raising 8 kids. And I just wanted someone who was going to be a fighter, who was going to stand there with me, next to me, embrace my kids, love them. And then, we'll figure out life together. And that's what literally I prayed for the few weeks leading up to when I met her. So,
Wow. Yeah. That's awesome. Okay. It's not complicated enough. You decide to open a business to just complicate things a bit more together. Tell me about that dynamic and how the business relationship works and how you separate the romantic relationship from the business relationship.
Yeah, good question.
Well, so I would say, we'll go back to the first date. The foundation for the business was set really that night because our missions lined up in terms of we had found our purpose, each found our purpose. And we wanted to take our purpose and help others, right? To take the best of what we had to help others and so forth. And there were different experiences, but we knew that we were meant to go do this. And, about a year and a half into our relationship, I was still kind of on hiatus from work, raising the kids. I'd started to write the book, my book in the beginning of 23. Dawne had worked for years of the startups and helped build companies. And the situation she was in, the company basically had to shut down or let part of the crew go. And so, she's here sitting, do I just go back and try to build somebody else's company? And, but we started talking about it and we said, you know what, let's give this a shot. Like we believe that we can start this business and, we can go and help others. Right. And we had to figure out all the, the challenges that come with that. What was the message going to be? What was the market? Who were we really serving? Because we kind of serve different people, but we had to work through all that. And so that's how the business kind of came to be. The dynamic then about how we work together, and we are definitely different. I mean, like almost like night and day. Like I came from GE, $300 billion company, 100,000+ people, and we just did things a certain way, right? And I was an engineer by trade, so I have a very logical processing way of doing it. Dawne's coming more from the entrepreneurial perspective, and she's got more of a marketing brain. We both did sales, but we did sales from a different perspective. And
I came from a startup world, entrepreneurs, meaning you had to hunt and grind and work really hard to build, handle rejection repeatedly, all of those things that when you're in a big conglomerate like GE, where you're very cushioned, I'm not saying you don't have to work as hard, but it's a different way of working. And instant gratification doesn't come when you're building a company. So you have to be able to handle rejection a lot and then persevere through and keep going and try another angle and be creative. And so I'm a Libra. I'm a true Libra. There's two sides of me. The work one is not nice. I'm just a stickler. But then when we change gears and we get into the relationship me, I'm obviously who I am. So
yeah. But it has helped us, I think, tremendously. Some people would say, well, then you can never escape it. But we've had to work through a lot of things business-wise that we would have never have done if we were just each working our own jobs. And I think there's always a healthy respect, right? I think that's at the core of it. Even though we may disagree, there's a healthy respect for each other. There is a deep love for each other. So we want to make this work. So we know that it's something that might be business that we say, we might get frustrated with each other, but then we will come back together and we'll figure it out. And ultimately, I think we've done a very good job of not letting it bleed into our personal relationship. So,
and a high level of communication on the work side and the personal side. But yeah, I think we both fizzle out and we're like, I just need no more work talk. Let's just go be humans and have fun and go dancing or go to dinner. And you know what? We still end up talking about work sometimes, but it's by choice. Like, it's not like the whole night, and it's not that we're grinding or anything. So we're really good at shutting down.
Grit2Grace is the name of your business. Tell us a bit about what you do.
So Grit2Grace represents the process one must go through to get to the other side. So you have to get through the grit to get to the grace. And what we do for organizations is we work with organizations to humanize the workplace. And what that really means is bringing compassion and empathy to the forefront, creating compassionate leaders, helping them optimize their executive functions so that they can lead their teams more effectively and from a place of compassion. We work with the whole organization. So we work with, the leaders, middle management. Many times middle management, they're 20 years old, they're having to lead teams and they don't have a clue how to do it. And, we've witnessed different stories, but one in particular, a company who has great policies in place for bereavement or leave of absence. And they were having an issue because they acquired 7 companies. So there was a whole different culture there. And they were having trouble with folks who were away on leave of absence and then coming back. It was that transition process. And they were like, yeah, we don't understand what the problem is. And so the middle management was the ones who were dealing with those folks coming back from the bereavement or whatever. And they're not qualified to, manage someone who's, say, in his 40s or 50s who lost a spouse and just, had to bury her 3 days ago. And now the expectation from the company is, well, you got to get back to work because you only had 3 days off. I mean, that's how it is in the US. I don't know about Australia, but in the US, it's like, okay, we give you 3 days to bury your spouse, grieve it, and get back to work because the pressure to produce and be productive, is back. And so that middle management who in their 20s is responsible for telling, a 40, 50-year-old who lost their spouse, like, hey, you got to get back to work. Well, we go in and actually work with those middle managers to say, listen, you need to have empathy, compassion, and understanding. We can coach them on how to do that, but we can also serve as a coach to the individuals who came back and had to go through that process. And then we work with employees to help them bring their whole selves to work and really bridging that communication amongst all teams so that everyone knows, like the culture supports it. We want the culture to be a purpose-driven culture.
And I think the unique part, there's a couple of things that are unique about us, right? Is that we both were in the height of our corporate career when this happened to us. We went through significant tragedy, trauma, and so forth. And as we talked about earlier, had to go through a process to heal, a similar process. So, we teach that process. We give people the ability, the tools and so forth to help overcome things in their life so that they can kind of show up to work with a mindset that, allows them to continue to go forward, because we know how we were treated when we were in a situation at work. And so we have, some really healthy and fantastic examples of that. And there's also some challenges that we recognize with what happened as well. So those are the things we bring to the table. And so it's our stories, some of the stories that we're sharing today, are stories that we would share during our training and our workshops and so forth. And it helps us connect, and I think resonates with the audience and so forth, because look, I mean,
everybody goes through something.
Everybody's going through, we talked earlier about what's going on in Australia before we even got on. And there's just challenges, right, in life these days. And people are dealing with a lot of stuff. And if you just come in and it's all about business, it's all about work and like grind, give me more performance, eventually it's going to snap, right? Something's going to break. But if you go into an environment that is healthy and that supportive, there's good communication protocol and the way you talk to people, and you have compassion and empathy, in the end, you're going to have a much more high-performing team that wants to do well for you as a manager and for your customers and for the company. And you're going to thrive in that way. And there's plenty of examples in the world of companies that do that.
And you'll be a place that people want to stay instead of, leaving, right? So what's common here is burnout and then leaving. People just up and leave their position because they feel taken advantage of and not valued, and rightfully so sometimes. And so, engagement is a huge issue here, and retention. So when we come in and fix those problems, that's where the company benefits as a whole, financially, but also as a culture within. And the way we demonstrate this is through keynote speaking, leadership training, developmental training, as well as workshops.
And we do. And so that's a big focus corporate wise, but we'll do individual coaching, right? We've talked, you kind of get a feel for our areas of expertise based on our experience. So we coach people in those particular areas. We also have books that are both in the process, so that will become part of the business as well. And, we have a podcast as well. We kind of do it for more, to get our brand built and just to kind of get out there. It's fun for us as well. We utilize some of that for business, but, it's a different aspect as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So it's been so lovely hearing your stories. And I guess one of the things we'd like to know is, what advice would you give to someone who's looking to rewrite their story?
I'll go back to just the story that I talked about personally with mine. I think, and Stephen, you asked, what allowed Two Hearts of Joy to show up that day? I think, to rewrite your story, I think you have to face into your pain, right? I think you have to work through what those challenges are. And it may take time, it may take help, it may take a counselor, it may take a coach, it may take a mentor, it may take a pastor or a priest. It may take all of them, right? To help good friends, family, and so forth. But in the end, I think for you to truly achieve what you want to in life, you have to work through those things that have held you back, work through the pain. And ultimately, you may find on the other end of that a purpose that is much, much different than what you were originally, or the trajectory you're really originally on in your career, right? You may have been an accountant who went through a tragedy and you come out on the other side, and now all of a sudden you're an expert who can help others because you've lived through it, you've solved it, you resolved it, and you figured out a way. And I just think, we hear, because, similar on a podcast, we do a lot of transforming your pain into purpose stories, and we just see so much of it, right? Where people who go through the pain, as hard as it is, ultimately come through and rewrite their stories in a way that's beautiful, right? Magnificent.
And I would probably say, if somebody came to me and said, I want to rewrite my story, I would dive into their story with them, but I would encourage them to look at it differently. Envision that rewriting their story, this actually is their story. So the story that they want to rewrite is actually meant to be their story, and there's no need to rewrite it. It's a matter of living through it, navigating through whatever challenges had been brought to you, and trying to make good with it, and then turn it around to help others. Instead of saying, I hate that life that I lived, I want to change it, rewrite it. Actually look at it as a blessing, no matter how bad it is. We all have something horrible that we've had to live through. And we could all say, oh my gosh, if I could go back and change it and do it differently, I totally would. I never thought I'd say this ever, but I would never change my story. And my life was brutal. But now being on the other side of it, I get it. I understand why I had to live through it. I say I'm a slow learner because, I stayed too long. I'm too loyal. And that would be something maybe I would say, I could change or rewrite, maybe be quicker to leave. But it made me who I am. So why rewrite your story? Embrace your story.
Absolutely. So it's almost like, really, you're not rewriting what's happening, but you're rewriting perhaps the meaning of what you went through. So if you were to go back now and rewrite your story in that way, what would that look like for you?
I would write it from a different place. I would write it from a place of gratitude, for sure. And then, honestly, I wouldn't do anything differently.
No, look, I think I remember I was on the podcast one time and they were asking me a lot of questions about, my story and so forth. And at the very end, they asked me a question. They said, how would you give us one word to describe what I had just talked about over the previous hour? And I said, blessed. And they were like, what? Like you could tell there was a silence. And then they asked me to explain. I'm like, look, I can't change what happened, right? I can't go back and rewrite history from that perspective. What happened to us, what happens to us, happens to us. It's how we deal with what happens to us, right? So I just think the journey that, similar to what Dawne just described, the journey that we went through ultimately is building us every step of the way to become, and again, from my perspective, it's my faith, God leading me down the path that ultimately he wants me to be, not making the decisions for me, but opening up doors and building me, helping me be stronger inside, growing, healing, and so forth. And, you know, the story then becomes what you make of it and how you, rebound from it or work your way through it and so forth. And so I feel blessed that I am where I am and have had the journey that I've had and have the perspective on what I've come through to be where I'm at today. So
thank you so much. That's a really beautifully articulated way of saying that.
Dawne and Larry, it's been great having you on our show today. And if you want to know more about them, you can check out the show notes where we'll have all their socials and website. Once again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yes.
It was great being here.
Thank you for joining us on the Rewrite Your Story podcast.
We hope you found this episode enlightening.
For more information on the topics discussed, please visit our website at stephenandsharlene.com.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, share it with your friends, and follow us on social media at Stephen and Sharlene.
Until next time, stay informed and inspired.
This is Stephen and Sharlene signing off from the Rewrite Your Story podcast. Thank you and stay blessed.